begin recording our meeting just so we have this and I can post it for people to see in the future. Um, and I will share my screen and get going here today. All right. So again, welcome. Part 4 of our spring webinar series on transformational learning in Montana Advanced Opportunities. Good to see you, and hopefully this provides some opportunities to collaborate. It's going to be a little different than in past meetings where we've had just opportunity to listen. So today I really want us to break out into build our network, to have the opportunity to share and discuss what's going on in your schools and share your vision for what your ideal school might look like. Let's see. I had used this slide in our part 2 webinar series, but I just don't think we had time to talk much about it. So I wanted to begin here today. When we talk about ways to personalize learning for students, I know that every district and every administrator and teacher are on a different paths in order to make this happen. But here are some ways that I personally have had the opportunity to experience and personalize learning for students. And then we will have an opportunity to kind of jump in here and talk about these as you see them fit for your school and your students. So the first one is individualized pacing. And when you talk about individualized pacing, I know my first concern was how do I keep track of where my students are and what their needs are. So some opportunities and some tools that you can use to individualize pacing within schools would be data collection charts, leaderboards, which we had talked about when my mentor and colleague Susan Jensen joined us, as having leaderboards for your essential standards for your students. And then this leads to mastery-based competency, where students are mastering content before they move on, instead of moving on as the whole group of students in a classroom. The second idea is flexible learning groups in order to personalize learning. And this concept kind of comes a difference comparing a workshop role as a teacher, as a facilitator, versus whole group instruction. When I personalized my 8th grade math class, this was a key for me, that how do I allow students to move at their own pace and know where they are, but then also how do I facilitate their learning and provide individual students what they need, and be able to group them according to where they currently are and what standards they're working to master. And how I did that was using workshops and scheduling workshops with my students instead of teaching to the whole group. Another way that we can personalize learning for our students is blended learning. And typically blended learning is using an online LMS, which we'll talk about, but an online curriculum to support student learning, and then allowing the teacher to facilitate those students that are not accessing that online curriculum. In more of a flipped classroom kind of idea. Another way is project-based learning, where students gain knowledge and skills by working for an extended period of time to investigate and respond to an authentic and engaging question or problem. Again, this helps by create buy-in for students. It helps them use their nature of inquiry and wondering what's going on in the world to help them learn. Another way to personalize learning, the online curriculum or an LMS. I've had experiences with Google Classroom, which I don't believe is a true LMS, but it's a nice free version that to get teachers and classrooms started. Canvas, Oberworld, which came out of the University of Oregon, Blackboard, Schoology, and Moodle. And so when we look at transformational learning dollars from your grant, one way that you could support a personalized learning is to use some of that funding to purchase an online curriculum and or a learning management system, which then allows students to have that individualized pacing and that blended learning opportunity. Work-based opportunities, which we spent last month talking about, more of that mentorship, the opportunity for students to have relevance and purpose within their learning. Again, Montana Advanced Opportunities provides funding for that support in those experiences for students to be able to get out into the workforce and find parallels between what they're learning in their classroom, their own personal needs, desires, interests, and then that post-secondary experience. And then the last one is performance-based assessment. I know Mike and I have had some conversations around this, where students apply and demonstrate learned skills and knowledge, often requiring them to use higher levels of thinking and then greater depth of knowledge. And I know when I was a teacher, classroom teacher in Nevada, we talked, it seems like every professional development, about the DOK, right? The depth of knowledge, and how do we get students to learn at a greater level and have these skills that they can transfer from grade to grade or from subject to subject instead of just regurgitating information. So performance-based assessment and that true authentication of demonstrating what they know and have learned is one way to do that. So several different ways. I would think beginning in a personalized learning environment to jump into all these is tremendous and probably completely overwhelming. But even if you have teachers who are interested in this and can pick one or two of these ideas or concepts to start personalizing the learning in their classroom and transforming what their classroom currently looks like into more of a 21st century classroom, these are some ideas. So our first collaborative opportunity is the opportunity to share, how is your school personalizing learning for your students? So we'll just stay all here since it's just the four of us, but would love to hear what's going on in Plevna, Billings, and Alberton.
I'll talk. I'll say we're starting to slowly roll out the ability to do project-based learning at an elementary level, and we'll be giving more opportunities to continue that in the future. When you do project-based learning, the students are an active part of what those authentic assessments look like in creating their own rubrics. For instance, if they're doing an entrepreneurship class, the students ask themselves three big questions. What does a successful business look like? What's a successful business person act like? And then the third and most important one, how does the business affect the global economy and your community? So yeah, that's how we're progressing.
Thanks, Micah.
Yeah, well, to follow with what Mike has said, we are expanding for next year, I should say. We are expanding our projects course or class period into the middle school. So it'll include 7th and 8th graders. And we're going to do that as either a makerspace or as a service projects sort of learning opportunity. So get our younger students prepared to more of a individually driven learning experience.
Nice. Thanks, Nick.
Yeah, for us, I'm thinking of so we've got a couple of things going on. I talked the last webinar about our work-based learning stuff that we have for like our internships and workplace experiences. So built into that, we have obviously a teacher of record overseeing it. But we have before we get it set up, we have them set up assessments for both for the student and for the employer and for the teacher overseeing it, so that we kind of have three different parties. The students is evaluating themselves on both the soft skills that are in their workplace experiences as well as some of the hard skills. So, for example, a welding kid, they're getting evaluated on, are they, do I think I'm, doing a good job of showing up on time, being ready to work, working well with others, as well as, hey, am I doing these welds correctly? So that's one. And then also we've got some hybrid stuff going on with some of our kids that are in the, like, I would call them like high-end lab situations where they're in a business student, for example. He's in the managerial science class that we offer up at Skyview. He needs a little bit more depth. He's a really high-end student. So the teachers worked with us to provide a series of like job shadows with one of our federal credit unions because he's interested in finance. And so he's going through a similar process. So like he's actually in one of our classes, but where the teacher put together kind of that work-based learning aspect for this, some of the higher end students are ones that really want to get out there and experience things. And he's doing the same thing where he's, getting shuffled around this credit union, but also he's doing some self-assessments. He's assessing what's going on in those departments for so Valley Credit Union, they've developed some things so that they get some feedback from the student to see how they're doing in each of their areas. So I would say we're really trying to, we're trying to build those types of things and really be flexible with students. Because like I said, that student wasn't ready for a full-on workplace experience. He was, but he kind of got a hybrid, personalized opportunity because we have our career coaches and they were able to kind of accommodate that with the teacher involved as well. So those are ones that I can think of as of right now.
Yeah, thanks, Bo. I think it's interesting that all three of you shared about not only helping the student understand the curriculum and the content, but also those citizenship skills, right? So how do we provide services for others? How do I conduct myself as a citizen? How do I conduct myself as an employee? And that those are those skills that when I talked about in that last slide, just being able to translate from one subject to another or one area of their life to another, that these are those lifelong skills that depending on who you ask, might be more important than being able to fill out the correct answer on a test question. So thank you for sharing. Another concept when we talk about personalized learning is the teacher's role. And I know that I think we started our first webinar series with this, talking about this idea of how do we change our teachers or help our teachers transfer from the content transmitter to the facilitator of learning. And I got this information. I don't know if any of you have read Self-Directed Learning by Malcolm Knowles, but some great worksheets and planning opportunities for you as an independent learner, but then also to teach and convey this to others, as you see my source down there. But he talks about the content transmitter asking themselves these questions. What needs to be covered? How can I organize this content to manageable units? How can these units be organized into a logical sequence? What means of transmission will be most effective for transmitting each unit? And then let's assess, right? So the same assessment given to all students at the same time. And as we work to try to change this idea to helping teachers and helping those people that are working with our students become more facilitators of learning. And he poses these 7 different ideas, and I'm going to just share some questioning that would come out of each of these so you can hopefully get a better idea of them. The first one is the climate setting. So as students are asked to be the owners of their learning and the teachers are more the facilitator versus telling them and dictating what they need to learn, questions that this facilitator might be asking themselves are, how do I get learners to feel comfortable with one another as mutual resources for learning? And we often call this collaboration. And how can I help them gain an understanding of the concept of self-directed learning and my role as a facilitator and a resource for their learning, and not the sole entity of what they're going to be learning and how they're going to be learning it. The next concept he talks about is planning. Questions that you would ask yourself as a facilitator of learning and planning are, what procedures do I determine as a teacher, and what procedures do I encourage my students to determine? And then how do I ensure students are progressing regardless of what pace it might be, and making sure that they have the tools to support their learning, but then also that I have the tools to support the measuring of their progression of learning. I know that as I've heard a pushback, both as a teacher and as a program manager, that when we talk about allowing students to work at their own pace, there's parents, teachers, students who say, well, if you allow students to work at their own pace, that some students will never progress. And I think that it's really important to understand that in any area, we all progress at different paces, all right? So how do we build this vibracious learning environment for students to ensure that they want to continue to progress? And a lot of it is by that ownership and allowing them to decide what's important to them to learn, based on their needs and their own interests and desires. The next piece he talks about is the diagnosis needs for learning. When we talk about this, it's what are the essential skills and knowledge students need to learn, and how will I assess them? And then how can I ensure a sense of ownership of learning for my students. And again, when students have ownership in their learning, they can't help but to want to progress, right? Because it's important to them. It's what they have determined they will want to learn, and then be able to help them finish and accomplish their goals, which leads us to goal setting. So how can I work to support and communicate learning objectives with students is what a facilitator might ask themselves, as well as how will students communicate their learning goals to all stakeholders, parents, peers, and teachers. And one way that I use this is we had goal setting sheets. Mike could kind of talk about this as well. Goal setting sheets for students to determine what they wanted to learn, how they were going to learn it, and then how they're going to actually be assessed in that learning. And then they were able to share those goals with me as a teacher, but with parents at parent-teacher conferences, with their collaborative working groups that they decided on. And then they actually shared those goals with community members, school board members, superintendent who would often come in and visit our classrooms. So having students own those goals and then being able to communicate them was invaluable to allowing them to be owners of their learning. The next one, designing a learning plan. So a teacher who would facilitate learning might say what resources are available to support student learning and what help will individual students need. I know another pushback when we went to one-to-one devices in our school in Nevada, and this personalized learning approach is that students are just learning from a computer, right? So in order to have a personalized learning plan developed, it's really that teacher asking, what do my students need and how am I going to make sure that all those students are getting the support that they need in their learning? And so having those collaborative learning opportunities with not only peers to peers, but peers to that teacher as well, working in that workshop model. Second to the last one is engaging in learning activities. So being able to answer the questions, how can I make myself available to all students regardless of their different varying needs? And I think that that's a question that every teacher asks themselves every given day based on the type of classroom that they're teaching in. And technology and having an LMS and an online curriculum truly frees up a lot of that time to be able to work one-on-one and in small groups with those students. But then also how do I know what levels of support different students need at different times? And then finally, Malcolm Knowles talks about evaluating learning outcomes. You know, we've talked about project-based learning, we've talked about student assessments and performance-based assessments, but how do I provide an immediacy of feedback, which I think in this model is key. If we're allowing students to progress at their own pace, taking 4 days to get them back the grades or the score on their assessment probably is not the most valuable way to communicate proficiency and progress. So being able to use and find those digital online tools that provide an immediacy of feedback. But then also, how do I provide opportunities for students to show evidence of learning and mastery of skills, which is ultimately what we are looking for as teachers as they progress through curriculum and information that's important to them. So the next question that the floor is open to is what conversations are happening in your school to change the role of the teacher from a content transmitter to a facilitator of learning?
Well, I'm happy to go first again. If we're going to do it this way, I'll talk again. So in regards to the conversations that are happening at our school, in the past, I've shared that Alberton is redoing our portrait of a graduate and going through a pretty big process in regards to getting all stakeholders, business owners, parents, community members, alumni of our high school, and current students, current teachers, all the admin, board members. We do a monthly meeting called our redesign team meeting. This week, our redesign meeting is actually tomorrow night. We're doing empathy interviews. And so the empathy interviews will help guide, that huge transition of more than just changing the role of the teacher from the content transmitter to the facilitator, but even at a bigger level. But it's a great way to get conversations going. There's just 7 questions, things like, what are some of the biggest changes you've seen in our community or in most recent years, right? And then we keep going and going. So we're just having real hardcore conversations about the design of what we're dealing with and how instructional strategies go out. So that's some of the conversations we're having.
Our conversations right now are happening at the ground level. We're doing those in our faculty, in our team meetings, in our PLC meetings. It even trickles into some of our MTSS as far as how can we use our transformational learning program to better fill in the holes and meet the needs of the kids that are brought up in those meetings. So that's where and how the conversations are happening here for us.
I would echo, I guess, what I said before with the work-based experiences. And then also what Nick kind of said, we use our PLC process a lot for this. So myself and the career coaches are constantly hopping around different, both at the middle school level and the high school, hopping into different PLC groups and trying to get some of that, the transition done during that time where it's really focused on, those types of things.
Matt, do you want to jump in and share it all? I know you missed the first part of it, but remember, are you from Hamilton? Oh, man. All right. Well, we'll keep Matt on mute, and if he joins us, that's great as well. Yeah, and in my experience with changing from this role of being the the teacher in the front of the room to being able more a facilitator of learning, I definitely had my doubts as a classroom teacher, right? So I think I shared this story before, but my principal came to me and said, I know that you're struggling in this new content area. Have you thought about doing this? And I truly thought in my mind, this will never work, right? This will never work to allow students to decide the materials that they want to use in order to help them learn, to allow some students to move on before others are ready, to allow students to reassess, right, in order to demonstrate proficiency instead of just giving that assessment at one time, and regardless of the performance, everyone moves on. And so I was definitely a doubter at the beginning of this process in my professional career as well. But looking at it, I would never go back. I would have a very difficult time teaching in that traditional classroom setting. And I found as a teacher, even though I liked being in control, which I think a lot of teachers do, and kind of holding the keys to the kingdom, I truly learned to enjoy teaching in workshop groups, right? Where I'm teaching a group of 5 or 6 students who have similar needs, similar interests, similar desires, and working on the same content standard, and being able to have those authentic conversations with them instead of posing the one question to the entire group and having 1 or 2 students answer. So definitely a change in mindset, a change in purpose, but at the same time, a very valuable change that I was able to experience. And hopefully, as you continue to have these conversations with, the ground up, that your teachers in your schools, your stakeholders, your students, your community members, that they understand the value of this as well, and allowing students to flourish in their areas of interest. My next resource for you is a book, What School Could Be. This is from Ted Dentersmith. I know Micah has shared her network with us, with Ted, and his app, which is very beneficial. Office hours, several different groups and sessions in the evenings that allow for professionals to get together and network. But in his book, he shares several different experiences as he travels around the United States in what model or ideal classrooms could look like. And as he shares these examples, he comes to a piece in his book and talks about that regardless of what classroom it is, they have these peak principles of powerful learning. And you can see them here on this chart. Knowledge, which is the depth and the retainment of information, which is what, again, I think that we all strive for, is how do we get students to dig deep into what they want or what's being asked of them to learn, which usually is what they want to learn. And then how do they retain this information and use it to continue to build in their educational experience. Agency, providing students voice to be heard, but then also allowing them to decide what's important for them. Their own personal agency, he states, their own personal agency can mean working at their own pace on a laptop, but extends to their community as they teach, inspire, motivate, and learn from each other, which when we talk about post-secondary experiences, that's what we all do every given day. I mean, that's what we're doing right now. So how do we provide agency and allowing content to be free flowing for students, but then also allowing them to dictate that as well. And that online component I found was the first step for me being able to give students some agency. As a teacher, I created hyperdocs for their essential standards, and then provided several different links and resources that students didn't have to access every single one. They could go through, and when they just determined that they were ready to demonstrate their mastery of knowledge, they then assessed at that point. And so that's how I try to encourage and include that agency in my classroom, but then also allowed for the performance-based assessments at the end of that mastery. So when I think about going back 10 years and doing it again, I definitely would have conducted my personalized learning classroom differently. But for me, it was, again, trying to pick one or two pieces that I knew that I could implement right away, and then work to build on those and provide that flexibility and fluidity for me as a professional, but more importantly for my students, allowing them to know that things would change, and that we would just adapt and be fluid in what was being asked of them and what my role for their learning would be. Next, he talks about essentials. He talks about the 21st century classroom, the creative problem solving, communication, collaboration, critical analysis, citizenship, which we all talked about on the prior slides when we shared about how do we allow students the opportunity to gain as and build and grow as citizens, not just as students. And then the aspects of character, and then finally the purpose. And I think this really hits home to what's the purpose of learning? What's the purpose of our educational system? And he states that students work on problems that are important to them and their community. They complete projects with real world impact that can be displayed publicly. Over time, students gain conviction in that they can make a difference in the world. Purposeful work builds purposeful students. And ultimately, those purposeful students are what we're working to grow and foster as they leave our schools and into the community. So here is the next question for you. Is to pick one of the 4 peak principles: purpose, essentials, agency, knowledge, and share your vision for what this looks like in your school. Micah?
Well, there's so much of that. Let's see. I'm just trying to decide. So, I'll talk about agency. So we're changing how we do our advisory classes, right? Or sponsorship, homeroom, wherever you want to call it, at a junior high school level. We're going to try to increase the sense of agency by developing a house system next year. So kind of like Harry Potter, but not so frivolous. There's actual meaning and intent behind the house system that we're doing. It's based off of the Ron Clark Academy in Atlanta, Georgia. So there's 4 houses with meaning behind them, and it's cross grade levels. And it builds community, right? And what they're going to be doing is similar to the 20% time, also known as Genius Hour. By looking at this, the idea is hopefully they'll be able to look at the 17 global challenges identified by the United Nations and potentially get that Genius Hour time to work as a house and a pod towards a greater goal. So yeah, that's what I envision, is seeing students having an opportunity to solve today's problems, right? Because they will be the ones that figure out how to reduce plastic waste in the oceans and all the other 17 of the global challenges. And so it's an opportunity for them to work as a community across grade levels towards something real meaningful without structure.
Anyone else wish to share on one of the 4 peak principles and what this might look like? Even in your vision, doesn't have to be currently in your school, but what if you could build your own school and lay the rules and have complete ownership over that, what that might look like for you?
I would say the one that came up for me is that we have a win period that we have at our middle schools. It's what I need. And so that's it's about, I think it's like 35 minutes or so every day that students they have a host of things that they basically get to choose what they want to do. So for some students, that's an opportunity to do like early interventions for, hey, I'm behind here. So a teacher has 5 students who are not, where they need to be in a certain unit. It allows them to reteach and do some of that stuff. But there's ones that are like, PE or physical activity where, hey, I get to shoot a basketball for 35 minutes or whatever. And then there's some that we're going to do with that are career based and really like pathway based. That is, so the student could choose, because we did a survey with our students and they said one of the things they're most interested in at middle school is learning more about the classes that they can take when they get to high school and about careers in general. So we're going to, this next year, we're going to pilot some of the stuff and really try to increase the knowledge base amongst our middle school students about what exactly what type of career classes they can take during high school, and just what type of careers kind of. So it kind of clicked for us. We had a kid who we were at the middle school level. He was kind of complaining that he's like, hey, I don't really like to be in school. I like to, I don't feel like I fit in. He's probably at risk to be one of those students who doesn't finish. Well, it was coming up that, hey, he is a tactile learner. He really likes to he was getting a lot of construction careers that were coming up, and we had to fill him in about, hey, did you know next year at West High you can take a construction class, and then you can take construction trades. By the time you're a junior, you could be out on the Career Center house, and then by the time you're a senior, you could be in a workplace experience where you're spending part of your senior year out and actually earning credit. And so it's kind of like we're taking those types of, those things that we're doing at the middle school level, and we're putting it into every day into their schedule during that win time to try to give them that information that they need to stay engaged in high school and actually maybe learn a little bit about, hey, I get to explore this career that I'm interested in. So that's kind of what I was thinking as far as like increasing the knowledge amongst our students about what exactly we have to offer within our school district.
Thanks, Bill. Nick, Joe, or Matt, are you interested in sharing?
I suppose our focus is really on the purpose of why we're doing the public service projects, the makerspace, the project periods, really for the kids to better articulate what it is that they are trying to get out of it, and what competencies that they intend to meet with each of those.
Thanks, Nick.
It's kind of our approach too, trying to figure out, giving the kids more agency into what it is they want to learn. Our discussion in our transformational learning and advanced opportunities committee has been, is there a better way? Do we have to rely on the classics to teach reading skills? Can we look at other literature that kids are more interested in reading and still teach the same kind of skills? And then giving kids opportunity to create projects on their own that they may be interested in, to achieve learning those same standards. So it's giving kids more options, I think.
Yeah, Joe, in my work with the Trades Academy, one of my jobs was to do a curricular crosswalk between the English language skills for 11th and 12th graders, and then the English language skills that students had to be able to demonstrate in order to move successfully through their John Deere curriculum. And that kind of leads into what you were talking about, is that there were so many literacy skills that these students had to be able to have and demonstrate in order for them to work through their coursework. And we did a lot of like recording them and having them share their experiences and creating videos and models with these students, you know, where they were doing public speaking and they were having conferences with their mentors in the John Deere community, that we were able to go to a pass fail idea and concept for those students instead of you know, A, B, C, D, and making them sit through the Shakespeare, the, you know, the things that were completely irrelevant to them, but being able to find that relevancy for them within their John Deere curriculum. So interesting that you bring up that idea of, you know, do they really need to sit through a class in order to gain the skills necessary to be successful in the post-secondary world, outside of an English classroom or a math classroom. So thank you for sharing that. So in close, let's talk just briefly about resources. So educational author Jade Cross says, knowledge is moving from the individual to the individual and his contacts. So I have posted my contact information here, my OPI email, as well as my own personal cell phone. So at any time, if you know, if you have questions or need contacts, I've got several people from classroom level up through superintendent level who I've either worked for or worked with when we talk about professional learning communities and transformational learning. So I am more than happy to share my network, working to continually grow that network as well. And what I would like, and we don't even have to share, if you just want to put your contact information in the chat box, for those who, if you feel comfortable, for those to reach out to you, if they would like to, you would be willing to share your networks with others as well. And just from my work with Micah, I know that she's got a stellar network and constantly continuing to grow. And when I talk about that What School Could Be app, a great opportunity for continuing to network and building up your contacts as we work towards this this messy work, but I think it's such important work for our future and for our students. So thank you for those of you who are willing to share your contacts and your networks with others. That is all I have for you today. I just thank you for your participation. Thank you for sharing what's going on in your own schools, and hopefully as we continue to network and build transformational learning in the state of Montana, that it becomes something that goes on beyond what just us, right? That it carries on and it truly transforms what learning experiences for students will look like in the future.
And Crystal, confirming, sorry, it's only an hour, 9 to 10 on
9 to
June
10.
21st.
Okay.
Yep.
So a little sneak peek premiere for those who are on. Micah is working with Jeff Cruz, and they're going to put on an hour personalized learning, transformational learning session in June. We're looking June 21st from 9 to 10. I will send out that information as well. And Micah is working to create a flyer that we will invite more of the teacher level, right, Micah? Is that kind of what we're looking for instead of?
It could be anything and everything, right? And then that the redesign retreat is on August 10th and 11th, and we have confirmed speakers such as Susie Boss and Jill Ackers-Clayton and Kevin Honeycutt and Ginger Lumen and Susanna Johnson, World Punya Mersha from ASU. A lot of big folks are coming to that, and that will be a really affordable professional development coming again August 10th and 11th. So yeah, we'll have flyers for both of those sooner than later.
And just to support that, as you look at the professional development piece of transformational learning grants, your transformational learning dollars could use to support your teachers in that. As that, and I would even say the Montana Advanced Opportunities, when you look at the 40% of CTE enhancement of personalization, that both of those would fall underneath that. So if you have teachers that you think might be interested, or you want to start sharing that information with your staff, Michael and I will get together and get some flyers sent out. But there's funding to support that through your transformational learning dollars. So hope we can continue to build build our network. So thank you, Micah, for that. Thank you all for participating. Have a fabulous rest of your Monday and week, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you, Crystal.
Thanks, Crystal.
Absolutely.